let's pick right back up where we left off. So now we can create a questionnaire. However, we need to have this concept of questions inside a questionnaire, and each question is going to have any given number of answers. So we can represent that as a questions table, and we're going to need a model for that with the migration, as well as an answer table, again, with a model and a migration. Let's create both of those at the same time. Back in my terminal, I'll go ahead and run PHP Artisan, make model for question, and I need a migration. And let's run the same thing for an answer. All right, so let's get that set up. Let's open up the create questions table. Let's get started with this. Very simple. A question needs to belong to a questionnaire. So we can say, okay, this table needs to have an unsigned big integer for questionnaire ID, as well as we need to have the actual question. Let's just call it question. So a string for a question. Okay, so then at the same token, we need to go ahead and open up the answers, and we need to have the same sort of relationship. An answer belongs to a question. So we need to have a table, unsigned big integer for the question ID, and then we'll need a string, which will represent the actual answer. We'll just call that answer. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up the models. We've got the question model right here. As always, let's go ahead and turn guarded to an empty array. And what kind of relationships does a question have? Well, we know that a question belongs to a questionnaire. So let's do that now. So public function, questionnaire, return, this belongs to a questionnaire. Perfect. We also know that a question has many answers. Let's go ahead and fill that up right now. So we'll say answers, return, this has many, answer, class. All right, so now let's jump into the answer and let's do the exact same thing. Guarded equal to an empty array. And then we'll have a relationship here because an answer belongs to a question. So we'll say public function, question, return, this belongs to a question, class, and there we go. Okay, the final thing of the puzzle is that we need to make sure that a questionnaire knows about this collection of questions. So let's jump into the questionnaires model. And let's add a new relationship here for questions. So a questionnaire has many questions. So return, this has many questions. Class, and there we go. All right, let's review through all of these relationships because I know I went kind of fast, but I think they all should make sense. So a questionnaire is simply a collection of questions, right? So we have this relationship here of questions. So a questionnaire has many questions, okay? In the inverse, a question belongs to a questionnaire, right? We know that. And in turn, a question itself will have many answers. So it has many answers, and this is the relationship. Now, if we jump into the answer itself, an answer simply belongs to a question. So that's the flow that we have between one to the other. Now, in order for us to make this work, we're going to need a form. We know that. We're going to have to create some sort of create view, and we're also going to need a controller. So let's call it the question controller. We've got the questionnaire controller. Let's go ahead and create a question controller. PHP, Artisan, make controller, question controller. All right, so looking at our UI, once we create a questionnaire, let's go ahead and jump into one of my questionnaires here. I should have at least one, and there it is. So cool title. I should be able to have a button here that says add a question. So let's do that now. In my questionnaire.show, right down here, let's add a link. And what do we have here in terms of URL? What we have here is a nested relationship. A questionnaires has questions. So that's the nested relationship. So we will start with questionnaires slash, then I need the ID of the questionnaire. So we'll add that in, questionnaire ID, and then slash questions, and then slash create, right? Because we're trying to create one of those. All right, we obviously don't have this just yet, so let's go ahead and create it. Let's go to the web.php file, and down here, let's add a new get route for slash questionnaires slash, then the questionnaire, so we can actually use route model binding, slash questions slash create. This will hit the question controller at the create method. All right, so we have that working now. Let's go ahead and wrap this up with some classes. We'll say btn and btn dark. There we go. And then in here, let's go ahead and say add new question. All right, let's give this a go. And there it is. So when I add new question, of course, now it says, well, you don't have a create method inside your question controller. Okay, close this up. Let's go to the question controller. And let's add that create method. I will need a view. So let's go ahead and set that up real quick. We'll go to the question dot create view. But now I do need my questionnaire. And I can use route model binding. So right up here, I can say app questionnaire. And then I can just save that as questionnaire. And I do need to pass that through. So we'll say compact questionnaire. Questionnaire. Now, if I want to simplify this up here, we can import it up there at the top. So let's go ahead and do that like so. So now we have an import statement over on the top. All right, let's go ahead and clean this up and we are good to go. Let's go ahead and create this create method. I will actually use the same exact create method because we're going to basically rewrite this a little bit. So let's save this as, let's change the directory into the question directory, like so. So now we've got a create method inside the question. Now this is going to say create new question. And so for the action on this form, we're going to go to /questionnaires/ the ID of this questionnaire. Again, we can grab that with questionnaire ID /questions. Okay, that is going to be a post route. Now, before I forget, let me go ahead and create that route. So again, that will be a post request and we can get rid of this and that is going to hit the store method. Okay, so that is good to go. Obviously, my form is going to change quite a bit. And this next part here is probably one of the most asked questions that I always get. And it is, how do you create through relationships? Basically, this form needs to create a question and a couple of different answers all at once. So how do I make that happen? Well, to give you the short answer is just by using arrays. But there's a little bit more to it than that. It's all about the naming convention and how I handle everything. And you'll see how clean it ends up being in my controller. So let's take a look at how to do that right now. First of all, I need my question itself. So we'll put the question right up here. So instead of title, let's go ahead and replace all of them with question. So my label will say question. Okay, now here's the tricky bit. For the name of my input, you need to name it something inside an array that you can reuse later. In my case, remember that I am going to save it to my questions table. Let me actually open that up. The questions table that I'm creating, it has a field of question. So I need a double nested of question because I need to be able to have it as an array of question equals whatever value I have. Now bear with me, I know that this is a little bit difficult to understand just with words, but by the end of this video, this will be very clear. So stick with me. So for the name, we'll say question, and then in array syntax, let's say question again. And I'll show you why I'm doing that in just a couple of minutes. And then let's go ahead and change our placeholder. Matter of fact, let's bump this down into a new line just so it's a little easier. And then we'll say enter question and then question help. Let's go ahead and change this text to something like ask simple and to the point questions for best results. Okay, then the error that we are going to be looking for, I know it's a little bit weird, but it needs to be question dot question. Now I know that's a little bit strange, but it's because of the nesting that we're doing up here. We're going to end up with nested like so. Okay, now in terms of this part here, I will actually cut this out. I need to change this all together. This will still be a form group. So let's add that back in. So we'll say a div of form group, but this is going to be a field set. And so inside of my field set, that's where I'm going to have a legend. And this one will be called choices. So these are the different choices. And then inside of here, let's divide each one with a div tag. This is just to create some separation inside of that. And to that, we'll paste what will be the first of the different choices we're going to have. Let's go ahead and have a small here. Let me bring it from here. One of these. Let's copy that. Let's paste it in here just to keep it consistent. So this is going to be an ID of choices help. Let me change that up. This is choices help. We're going to reference choices help through this right here. This aria described by, that's where we're going to reference this up here. So let's go ahead and change this over to give choices that give you the most insight into your question. So again, this right here is going to be the first of what I'm going to do 4 choices. In the ideal world, of course, with JavaScript or something like that, we would make this dynamic. But because we are focused on Laravel, I'm not going to interject with any JavaScript for this. We're going to do it 100% with PHP. So let's go ahead, create a form group for, let's change all these purposes for answer 1. And this won't be purpose, and this is going to be choice 1. And so again, my naming convention here is very important, and it's not going to be answer 1. It's going to be answers in plural, then we'll do the array, and then we'll do answer singular. And again, this answer here has to do with the fact that in my create answers, I am expecting it to be under answer. And I'll show you again why I'm doing this way in just a couple of seconds. So in terms of describe by, it's actually going to be choice help, like so. And let's also go ahead and break this up into a different line so it's easier to see. So we'll say enter choice 1, and we can actually get rid of this altogether. And now this one is going to be answers.0 because this is the very first error. So in that error bag of answers, I want you to grab the first one, which just has an ID of 0, and then give me the error for the actual answer. So that's how that one would work. Okay. So let's go through this one more time. I'm creating a field set. This is just simply so that I can group together a couple of different inputs that basically have the same functionality. We're creating a legend, which is the equivalent of a label for an input field. And then we'll have a small, and then again, the reason why I'm adding this is so that I can aria describe it by only once, and I only have to have this text once. Inside of here, I just have a simple label and input field. And the naming convention of this is just answers. So that way they get collected into a key of answers. This will be an array as notated by this. And inside of that, I will have answer singular. And then inside of that, it's whatever the user actually types into this input field. Okay, in terms of grabbing my errors, because we are nested in this particular way. So the first one is going to be found under answers.0 because it's a 0-based index. So that's what this is. And then the second one will be found under answers.1. So we'll go ahead and change this over to 1 and 2 and 3 and so on and so forth. Okay, so now all I need to do is go ahead and repeat this another time. And let's change all of my 1s for answer, for 2. And then I need to change this to 1. Okay, and then I can copy it again. And let's change all of my 2s to 3s. And then I can change this one to 2. And then finally, we'll do it one more time, and I'll change all of my 3s to 4, and we'll go ahead and change this to .3. And then at the end here, let's go ahead and change this to add question. All right, let's see what this looks like in the browser. We'll go ahead and hit refresh, and there we go. All right, so we've got a question. It's got the question here. So here would be something like, what should we do, right? And then here we'll have stay the same, change, do something, and do else, right? Something like that. Basically, they're going to be given 4 choices. Then they're going to add question. And then at that point, we should have 1 entry inside my questions table, and then 4 entries that belong to this question inside my answers table. All right, so what does the controller look like for that? Let's go back here. Let's open up the question controller, and let's start to work on that store method. Now, the very first thing about the store method is that we can actually continue to use route model binding. I'm going to need my questionnaire because that's what everything is sort of based off of. But first and foremost, let me go ahead and die and dump my request. I want to show you this whole structure that I did with the form. I think it's going to become clear once I show you what we're going to receive in the back end. Let's go ahead and die and dump the request, and let's just grab all of its values, all of its keys. So I will go ahead and add question. And there we go. So this is what I'm getting back. I'm getting an array under question. And inside that array, I have the exact thing that I need. I need that question. What should we do? And that's great because I can grab that and send it straight through my create method using a relationship. And then I've got this key of answers. And inside of there, I've got 4 answers, and each one is a key value pair, which is exactly what I need. I need the key to be answer. That way my database knows what column we're talking about. And then I need the value paired up to it. So this is exactly what I need. And this is the most important part of the setup of trying to create through relationships and trying to keep your code as clean as possible. If you create your forms properly, you basically don't need to do anything in the back end to repurpose these arrays. You can create any array shape that you need for the back end right in the front end. It's very simple to do. You just need to pay attention to how we are doing it. Okay, so let's go ahead and use what we know from this to create what we need. So first of all, let's talk about how to validate in a nested relationship. Okay, so let's start off by that. Let's go ahead and save it to data. And let's go ahead and do request, validate. At first glance, validating a nested relationship might not be super clear, but once you understand that we can use dot syntax for array notation, you may think, well, that's easy because that should just be question dot question. And that needs to be required. Where does question dot question come from? Let's go back to that create dot blade right here. Let's go back up here to where we actually grabbed the question. Look at the name. It's just simply question dot question. That's it. That's all it is. Okay. What about the next one though? The next one might be a little bit trickier because the next one is answers, but then it's an array. How do I get anything inside that array? Well, we can use an asterisk. So we can say answers dot asterisk dot answer. And answer comes from answer right here. So answers array answer becomes answers dot asterisk to represent the entire wildcard array dot answer. And that's it. That's good enough for validation. And I'll prove it to you right now. I'll go ahead. I will keep this open here in this tab just simply because I want to show you this from time to time and I don't want to have to keep dumping this out. So let me go ahead and create a new one here, a new tab. And let me go back here to just one. There we go. And let's add a new question. And again, I'm just keeping this here for reference. That's all it is. And then all I will do here is just hit this button and look at validation. Everything is working for us. Every single field is good to go. So we can type something in. And now if I ask question, you see that the validation error does go away. However, I don't have my old data. But that's actually a pretty easy fix. Why don't we fix that right now? Right inside my input, let's add a value. And the value is going to be old. We already kind of talked about old earlier in this series, so I don't really need to explain what it does, but we simply need to go in there and grab the question dot question. All right, does that work? Let's find out. We'll put SDF, and there we go. Now I do have my value. Let's go ahead and make the same change to my 4 choices. I'll copy this one. Let's bring it down here, and let's add it right here. Now this one is going to be this right here. So answers dot 0, which is 0 based index. So basically number 1 dot answer. All right, I'll copy that. I'll bring it in here. Let's change that to 1. Let's do it one more time. And then we'll do it one final time right here, like so. And so now I'll do SDF, SDF, SDF. I'll leave this one blank so that it fails validation. But notice that we still have the old values for each of these. And then, of course, at that point, if I actually typed in choice 4, then that goes through into my controller, which doesn't do anything right now. So we get a blank page. Awesome. Let's move on. Up next in the controller, the first thing we need to create is the question, right? We need to create this question in the questions table. Now, we already took care of all the relationships, so this is actually quite simple. We can save it to a question variable, and we can use the relationship that we already have through the questionnaire. Remember that the questionnaire is being passed through route model binding. So right here, we can say, okay, questions create. And now this is where the magic really happens. Let me die and dump this just so that I can show you. I am going to die and dump the validated data, not the request data, the validated data at that point. Okay, let me show you what that will look like. Add question. So now we've got this question, and that's all I need. And that has what I need. Okay, so all I need to pass in here is data, question. And then presumably at this point, I will have a question model. So with that question model, I can continue to chain and do the same thing with the answers. So I can say question. I know you have a relationship of answers. So on that relationship, I want you to create, but I can't just do create. I need to do create many because we are creating more than one at the same time. And to this one, I would pass in something very similar. Data, answers, right? And that's this array right here, which contains an array. And that's why we're going to use the create many. And at the end of this, I just need to redirect back somewhere. Let's figure out where we should redirect. I think that we should just go back to the questionnaire. We'll say questionnaire / and then I need the ID. Questionnaire, ID, and let's clean up our controller. Let's go over our controller one more time. So we've got our data, it's being validated, and then we're taking care of our nested values by using this dot notation. And I already showed you where that was, so I'm not going back to the create method. I'm doing it for both. In this particular case, this is an array, so I'm just using a wildcard. I need to make sure that they're all required. Every single value in there that has an answer is required. That's all it is. Then using my questionnaire, which I am grabbing through the top, I am using the questions relationship that I created at the beginning of this episode. And then we're going to create on that a new question. That is going to return my question model, which I'm saving to this variable. And using that variable, I am tapping into yet another relationship, which is the answers relationship. And then I'm going to create many. And then I'm using the data of answers. Again, just the way that I took care of my front end with the form. Then I'm simply going to redirect back to the questionnaire, where I'm presumably going to display this properly. To give this a go, we do need to migrate our database. So let's do that now. PHP Artisan migrate. That migrates our table. SQL Pro. Now we should have answers, which is empty, and we should have a question. Let's give this a go. Let's see if it just works. I'm going to refresh this. I'll hit continue. And it says not found, and that's okay. There we go. So we've got a question, and it's got the questionnaire ID, and then we should have 4 answers. And there are my 4 answers with my question ID association already done. I hope you see how powerful this whole thing is and how simple it is once you actually understand how creating the form in the correct location with the right names makes all of the difference in the world. Now for this lesson, we're running a little bit long and I know there's a lot of content in here. So let's break it up into another part where we actually take care of the front end, because right now my view is not even showing, but we'll take care of that in part 3. Thanks for watching. And as always, don't forget to subscribe and I'll see you in part 3.